Recently took a trip to the East Coast, stopped at the headquarters of the best sorority, then traveled to Boston to see relatives. Then I went on to Vermont. Here are the highlights and my recommendations. Boston was fantastic. Thank you, Auntie Nanaya. Then I took a small plane from Boston to Vermont. A very small plane. Vermont was very expensive. Unlike Kentucky, you've got to have a couple dollars to visit Vermont. It's very progressive. The public display of marginalized communities is affirmed in Vermont. I noticed it everywhere. Highlights of Vermont are Church Street, the Hildene, Billings Farm, Rokeby, and the Shelbourne. That's where I got the most bang for my buck. I rented a car partly, and I took the public bus while in the city capital. The food is costly, but fantastic. Here's a plate that I ordered. Marvelous. I did mostly walking while in Burlington, and my first place to visit was Church Street.
Look at how big this mine is. So I'm in Burlington, and at the city hall they have the American flag, and then they have a gay rights, or I don't know. Oh no, I guess that's the city flag, and then a Black Lives Matter flag. I'm loving Burlington, loving it.
Vermont was very green. Like I said, I walked everywhere. This was on my way to my Airbnb, strolling through town, another affirmation of marginalized communities in a city park. For me, Airbnbs were the most budget friendly. I loved the breakfasts at my Airbnb, marvelous. Strolling through downtown Burlington, I spent a lot of money here, way too much, but everything was just so great. So many old buildings, so relaxing, so much greenery, just strolling through town and relaxing. I love Burlington, Vermont. Murals on public spaces. You can't lose in Vermont. You can't lose in Burlington. One of my stops was at Billings Farm. It was a dairy farm. So many cows there. They say that in Vermont there are more cows than people. I can believe it. While in Vermont, you gotta go to a dairy farm.
Cheese. Here's a treat. You gotta say cheese for me.
I also stopped at the Vermont store. It was a historic, grand old fashioned Walmart. I loved it. Spent way too much money there also. My next stop was the Hildene Museum. The Hildene Museum and Historic Site was a home belonging to the Lincoln family, Abraham Lincoln's family. It was just so casual to find such a famous figure and his portrait just hanging around like normal. Oh, here's Uncle Abe's picture. He had a marvelous family home.
I am still at the Hildene, the Lincoln family home. It smells great. I'm at the goat farm, the goat dairy at Hildene still. So I guess these are baby goats. Sounds like they're yelling for their parents or their mother. That's what it sounds like to me. Oh, okay. So they weren't crying for their mothers, they were crying for their food. They're hungry. They're the baby goats.
Also on the property was the Porter's Museum. Abraham Lincoln's relative was affiliated with the Porter. And here is a one-room schoolhouse on the property. And shocking, there are more animals at Hildene in Vermont. So many animals in Vermont.
How many are in there?
So many.
How many of you and your friends are in there? Oh boy, look at him. Look at that alpaca. It's a storybook.
She's like, wait, I just got out. I get to see all the grass. Come here.
So, this is the Rokeby Museum. The primary structure is closed because of COVID.
Part of my Vermont itinerary was the Rokeby Museum. The Rokeby, you can spend half of a day here. It was very small. It was part of the Underground Railroad. The interior is a museum. The exterior is a representation of a Vermont living quarter. I love this exhibit because it showed how many slaves each president owned. But I think you'd love this museum. Please stop by.
Rokeby Museum in Vermont. Ferrisboro, Vermont. I'm at the Rokeby Historic Landmark. It is known for being part of the Underground Railroad here in Vermont. So I'm gonna finish taking a tour. The Rokeby Museum, they have this story, Henry's Freedom Box, pages of the story stapled to each tree, and people go walk around through the trees and read the story. I thought it was very meaningful the way they did this. Keeps you engaged and walking and moving. Love it. And it goes all the way around there. Enjoying Vermont on a trail at the Rokeby Museum.
Another part of my Vermont tour was the Shelbourne Museum in Burlington or near Burlington. The Shelbourne is an all-day event, a very strong recommendation. It was full of museums and exhibits. You will absolutely love it.
Here we go.
I took the city bus to the Shelbourne. You don't need a car if you don't want to rent one. I did use public transportation to get there.
Oh wow. Burlington, Vermont, the Shelbourne Museum. Loving it. People are super nice. This room reminds me of how my grandma, Gertrude Hawkins, decorated her house. She was so amazing, so perfect, so neat. So glad to be in a museum again. Still at the Shelbourne Museum. So many exhibits. The land is huge. It's huge. They had a representation of an old country store there at the Shelbourne. If you like old things, if you like history, if you like artifacts, you will love the Shelbourne. As a member of public education, I absolutely loved the one-room schoolhouse with all of the old artifacts, the buildings, the books, the writings on the chalkboard. So I'm at the Shelbourne. The staff is super nice. I have not been to any bridges since I've been in Vermont, and Vermont is famous for their bridges. Fortunately, the Shelbourne has a bridge on display. So I'm gonna go check out their bridge because that's what Vermont is famous for, their bridges. Yet I have not indulged in bridge tourism. So I am finishing up my time at the Shelbourne Museum in Burlington, Vermont. It is a museum with old buildings representing circa late 1800s, early 1900s. They have a schoolhouse, a toy room, a stone cottage, a smokehouse, carriage houses, a covered bridge, an old schoolhouse, and 3 museums with all of these unique art pieces, fine art, murals. I enjoyed myself. I would definitely recommend coming to the Shelbourne Museum.
Definitely recommend coming to Vermont. It is expensive, so bring plenty of money or plan ahead. My top 3 recommendations are Church Street, the Vermont Store, Hildene, Billings Farm, Rokeby, and Shelbourne Museum.